Hello, and good to be with you once again on these series of Restore videos when we look today at the third and fourth chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah. Now, there's no doubt that the first chapter of Isaiah, indeed much in the book, strikes one as being rather confused. We seem to be bouncing around. At one moment, words of condemnation, prophecies of doom upon God's people, and yet at the same time, shortly afterwards, there will be these moments of hope, um, of a glorious future, which is also part of the prophet's message. Now, as I said, this is rather confusing, to say the least. Um, and you may think, well, this is all just a bit of a jumble. Well, can't he make up his mind? Is he condemning God's people, or is he prophesying over them words of blessing? Well, maybe, in fact, it's not so much confusion as a deliberate strategy on the part of the prophet. Um, Scholars, of course, always want to be very precise and get a historical background right about biblical books, and never more so in the case of Isaiah, where the scholarly orthodoxy was that the first 39 chapters, Isaiah 1 to 39, were to be firmly located at the turn of the 8th century, around 7, 710, 720, 700s before Christ. This was the time when the Assyrians are marching through the area and conquering everything. They devastate and completely capture the more powerful northern kingdom of Israel, and then they turn their attention to Judah. And so it is said this is where we should locate these chapters, and the prophecies of taking away from Jerusalem all sorts of support and its military power are to be located in this period. Of course, miraculously, actually, the Assyrians did not, in the end, completely devastate the southern kingdom of Judah. Jerusalem remained. It may have had to pay tribute to the Assyrians, but it wasn't captured and remained independent for another 120, 30 years until at the beginning of the 6th century BC, the Babylonians, who succeeded the Assyrians as the dominant power in the area, put an end to the independent life of God's people for centuries. So all this historical background, it may fit, but actually the point here is that it could fit more than one period in the history of God's people. That these prophecies, which we find in chapter 3 of dire disaster falling upon the people, the support of bread and water taken from them, the end of their military power, even the complete vanishing of the fashionable life of the elite women of Judah, well, that could belong, yeah, at the time of Hezekiah and the Assyrian invasion in the end of the 8th century, but it could be equally true 130 years later. See, the point is this, I think, that Isaiah does this quite deliberately. He deliberately frames his prophecies to cover many situations, many historical periods. And what looks like confusion is actually what he sees as the pattern. That when people turn away from God, God leaves them to their own devices, and disaster ensues. And it's only when they're absolutely desperate, when things have got the worst they can be, that they turn back to him. But whenever they do that, whenever they turn back to God, then times of blessing will ensue. But often it's when we've just come to the realization that the way we've followed has led to disaster, it's only then that we're desperate enough to really turn back to God. And that was true in Jerusalem at the end of the 8th century before Christ, when perhaps there was a turning back at that point. And it was true when, after the final and utter disaster, when Jerusalem fell to the Babylonians and they had to go into exile, that they were desperate enough to turn back to him in that land of sorrow and weeping into which they were dispatched by the Babylonians. And is it also true for us in 2023? Things are pretty bad, aren't they, in church and nation? Perhaps it's only when things are really desperate that we will turn back to the Lord our God.